Welcome again. Welcome to the third and final lecture in this video series on light bars and guidance. And so this part of the lecture series, we're going to wrap up looking at the types of guidance light bar systems that we see out there, and then kind of look at the whole cost savings analysis, because that's usually a part that really was overlooked a lot when these systems first came out. So, terms to begin with, when it comes to the guidance, there's tons of options out there. And so there's always that question of which one is the right one. There's a lot of differences out there. The main differences we see is how the guidance system actually connects into the implement, to whether it's the tractor or the combine, whatever it is. That's the main differences we see in this. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus here. I don't get into what systems does John Deere have versus what Trimble or Ag Leader or Raven or Outback. There's just too many to go through. So we'll kind of focus more on the types that we see and how they work. So one of the more common ones we've seen is what I call the bolt-on type, and that's the aftermarket. And have really come into popularity because they're typically fairly inexpensive compared to some of the other ones. So they cost less. The other thing is that typically these are what we would call colorblind systems, as Ag Leader has a bolt-on system, what's called their on-track system. And it will work on a John Deere tractor, works on a Case tractor, put it into a Hagie sprayer. It works on everything, so it's colorblind. Typically, the bolt-on ones is where we see there's a motorized unit that turns the steering wheel. And so the variations you see is how that motor turns the wheel. Bottom left-hand corner there, John Deere has one, and even this one doesn't go just on John Deere. You can mount it onto a Case tractor. Basically, you take off the factory steering wheel and you pop this on. What's hanging down below is a motorized unit, and you just train that motorized unit to turn when it has to. It's a little bit of a calibration thing. Over bottom right-hand corner, you see that was kind of an older system. Still see those out there. That motorized unit basically attached right next to the steering wheel, right on top there was like a little rubber Nerf wheel, and so that's what spun the steering wheel. So it was a motorized unit that attached to the steering column, and that's just kind of popped down on the steering wheel. And then the upper right-hand corner, what you see is kind of a newer one, where basically the motorized unit, you fix gears to the steering wheel, and then that motorized unit basically hooks into those gears, and basically it drives those gears and turns the wheel. So that's typically what you would call that bolt-on type system. And like I said, they're fairly inexpensive. They don't cost much. Typically, the ones that you see there, typically just a couple $1,000s. Kind of the next step up is what I've kind of referred to as the integrated system. And this is where it's integrated into the factory-built steering system. Typically, these cost more because there's quite a bit of thought and quite a bit of equipment that goes into it. And what these do is basically you have a controller and basically sending electronic pulses down to a hydraulic block, and so it's turning the hydraulic steering. It's controlling the hydraulic steering. So you can kind of see in the bottom left-hand corner there, Trimble has what's called their autopilot. So yeah, controller and GPS hook into it. Then you basically tap into the factory installed hydraulic valve manifold, what drives the steering up front. Along with that, you have to have a steering sensor mounted up front, so it knows at what angle the steering wheel or what angle the tires are turned. So once again, fairly integrated. And these would work on tractors, combines, sprayers. A couple years ago, actually, students and I actually had a project where we did this to a Case tractor, similar to what you see there. It was took several days in the shop. I think it was 3 whole days in the shop with a crew of 6 of us to get it all put together and working. So a little bit of time and effort that goes into that. So a good old integrated system. A lot of them now are coming from the factory already built in. So now you just have to plug in the display and set it up, and you just go. One of the nice things about having that ISO bus system that we talked about in a couple units ago. Some other types that we see out there. There is some road guidance systems out there. John Deere, another company called Headsight, several others out there. And this is guidance, and what it is you can kind of see there's feelers on the corn head, and what they're feeling for is that is looking for that corn plant and looking for the rows. These systems do work on curves. A lot of people, as you're going around a curve, don't think it would work, but it does work. One of the best places where this works is if you have a crop that goes down. A couple years ago, we had wind that came through in late July, laid our corn over flat, but the corn came back and it did what was called goosenecking. And so the problem became, as we went into fall a couple months later, that corn being goosenecked, we were trying to combine on what we thought was a row, when reality was that corn plant, where it entered into the ground or where it came out of the ground, was actually a couple inches over. So that year I would have gone to great lengths and spent whatever money I could have had to buy one of these systems and put it in there, because it would have saved me a lot of headache. We had 2 fields where it took us a lot longer just to get through that field because of that goosenecking, and systems like this would have saved a lot of that. So this is another type of guidance that you see out there. Another one, John Deere has what's called their iGuide system. And basically what it is you can kind of see there in the 2 representative photos, not only do we have a GPS on the tractor, but we also have a GPS receiver mounted on the implement that's being pulled. And those 2 GPS receivers are talking to each other. And so as you can kind of see there, one on the left where the planter is starting to slide down the hill, that GPS is talking to the other one, and they're noticing that, hey, we're not in line with each other. So now it's going to cause that tractor to move up on the hill a little bit, so that we're going to start planting straight again. As well as in the bottom right hand corner, that implement down there, that potato planter that you see, that potato planter is actually steering itself. So the GPS that's mounted on the back is actually coordinating with the one on the tractor, and it's actually steering that implement. So it's the tractor driver still goes straight, but that implement's going to steer where it needs to go. So that's kind of another example of guidance that we see. It's not necessarily steering the tractor, the power unit, like the tractor, the combine, the sprayer. It's guiding something else. Trimble actually has a couple of varieties of this. They had what was called True Tracker, where basically same thing there. I've got a GPS on the implement, and it's actually steering. That implement's being steered. So you can see there in that upper photo, the GPS is right above a system where it's actually steering that piece of equipment on the back of that Cat Challenger. They also had what's called a True Guide system, where basically, once again, GPS on that planter communicating with the GPS on the tractor, and it's actually saying, hey, we need to move the planter over, make that adjustment. So once again, some other differences that you see out there in terms of that. Another one, I kind of found this kind of interesting. Stumbled upon this a couple years ago. There's a system out there called Farmer GPS, and that's their website. And what it was a farmer had an older laptop that didn't use in the house anymore, and thought, well, there's still some use out of this laptop. Why can't I put it in my tractor and utilize it in my tractor for my guidance? So build a software program. And you kind of see there's a screenshot of it there in the bottom right, where took the laptop, put it in the cab, hooked up a GPS, fires up the software and says, here's my pattern, and then gets his light bar across the bottom. And so you can kind of see there, this is a light bar system only, so there is no active guidance, not controlling the implement or anything like that. The other neat thing about it is the software is $399, so it's relatively very inexpensive to what we see in other systems out there. So someone had even questioned him about, well, what if my laptop crashes? He's like, well, go just get another used laptop. You can buy them really cheap. Nothing wrong with that. So it kind of gives you some insight into some other things that you see out there. Okay, wrapping up. The question became is when this stuff, when light bars and guidance systems first came out, a lot of farmers, a lot of people were very hesitant to adopt it because they just saw the price tag. And granted, the price tag was fairly expensive. But people just saw the price tag and was just completely turned off by that. And as an industry, we didn't do a really good job of showing what was the value in that system. And, so it was hard for people because we didn't sell the value part good enough. And the people we were selling to just saw that price tag and were just immediately turned off. So there was kind of a big push a while back to really push the value and showcase that. There was numerous spreadsheet applications that came about, and I'm going to post several examples of those out there on Blackboard. So take a look and run some scenarios through. It's kind of interesting to see what the differences between them. Kansas State put out one that is very complex. It's almost over the top, if you want to look at it that way. Case International has one that was a lot more straightforward and fairly easy, but still got the point across. And you saw numerous other ones out there as well. Okay, so I've switched over to a spreadsheet. This is one I created a few years ago, just as a kind of a basic tool to kind of show a little bit of that cost analysis. And so what I've got is basically width and distance up here. I got a field that's 1,250 feet wide, and it's almost 3,950 feet long. And the calculation there comes up and says it's 113 acres. This is actual field that we have. And so I just did a basic scenario of what if I'm spraying Roundup? And let's say I'm putting Roundup on at the rate of 16 ounces per acre. And it says I'm going to need, does a calculation and says, well, at that rate, I'm going to need to apply 15 gallons of Roundup to this field. And the cost is, and this is from a few years ago, but let's say the cost is $55 a gallon. So what it's going to cost me, it's going to cost $806 to spray that field, or $7.12 in terms of Roundup on the field, or $7.12 per acre to put Roundup on that field. And my sprayer is 60 feet wide, so I have a 60-foot wide pull behind sprayer. And let's just say without any guidance or auto steering system, I'm saying, I want to make sure I'm not leaving any gaps, so I'm going to overlap it by 3 feet. So what you see, and I'll have this spreadsheet posted on Blackboard, is anything that's in blue letters here with the kind of the light beige color background. These are numbers you can change, and the rest of it are all calculations. So, and so down below, as I can see, here's what it's costing me in terms of not utilizing guidance as part of this. So in one pass through the field, I'm covering 5.4 acres. And out of that 5.4 acres, there's almost a quarter of an acre that I'm overlapping. And so every pass that I'm doing, if I was utilizing it, I'd be saving myself almost $2. This is just in terms of the Roundup product. Imagine, I also have the cost for fuel to run into my sprayer or my tractor, and the wear and tear that goes with it. So you can run through the passes, run through it. Says, well, yeah, I'm going to have to make 21 passes through the field. And, if I had guidance systems in there, it would have saved me $41. Or the other way to look at it is I'm wasting $41 of that Roundup product because I'm also overlapping by that means. And so my savings is 36 cents an acre, or my wasted expense if you want to look at it that way. So this was just a very simple one I put together just to kind of highlight some of that. Here is one that Case International, Case IH came out with this a couple years ago. They actually had a whole website, and that website's no longer there. But what you can do is you can go in here and once again put in your variables. What's highlighted in yellow is the variables you put in. So let's say in this case it was a 90-foot sprayer. Well, I can put in my 60-foot sprayer, pull behind sprayer. And let's say I'm spraying at, I'll say maybe I'm spraying at about 12 miles an hour. The cost of fuel right now, well, that was at 238, but let's say the cost of fuel right now is $3.40 a gallon. And let's say my tractor is going to utilize about 6 gallons an hour, which is about right. I'm not leasing the tractor, so I'll leave that blank. And once again, it goes into full tractor horsepower. What's my labor cost, my chemical cost per acre, what's my fertilizer cost, and once again, how many acres. So in this example, it's got 2,000 acres. Over on the right hand side, you can see the kind of the difference with the different type of GPS systems we have. So like an RTK system versus the OmniStar XP, HP, and then the good old differential GPS. So it ran the calculation, says, yep, here's what your savings would add up to. Not only this, but now you can also jump into, so I can go into spraying. So it carried over my crop acres, and it says, okay, how much am I going to overlap on the headland? So if I get to the end of the field, when I go to shut that sprayer off, I could have an overlap at 20 feet. Well, I can change it and say, I'm really good on hitting that switch, so I'm going to change it to 10. And my sprayer is 60 feet wide. And I'm going to spray that field twice a year for my corn and my beans. And right now, let's say my cost for spraying is $15 an acre. And once again, I'm going to overlap it by 2 feet just to make sure I get it sprayed. Well, it can run back and do the calculations. It came back and says, hey, in 1 year alone, I'm going to save $880. And if a guidance system right now costs about $2,000, well, I can run the math, and in a little over 2.5 years, this system is paid for. This is just on my sprayer. Now, if I go into my planning side of things, I could plug in all my planting information. It's going to come back and say, here's what I'm going to save on my planting side. Or if I do anhydrous. And the nice thing is at the very end, it totals it all up. So if I was utilizing guidance and precision ag as part of my planting, as part of my spraying, as part of my anhydrous, given the scenario right now, my total return in 1 year would be $10,600. Well, gee, if that system only cost me $5,000 to put in, that system paid for itself in 1 year, in 1 year alone. So when they started coming out, this is what really made prove the point to a lot of people of where, hey, these guidance systems are actually, are valuable and, bring something back to the operation. It's an investment. And once these tools started coming out, this is where we saw huge inroads into people adopting this technology as part of their farming operation. I had a hard time convincing my dad. It was the same thing back in the day. As my dad just saw this price tag of the system we had one time was quoted at $5,000. My dad just $5,000, no way. Wasn't until we sat down and actually went through this same spreadsheet right here, and we plugged in some of the variables, and my dad saw this and wow, convinced him right there on the spot and go ahead and order the system, and we've been utilizing it for years now. In our planning and our spraying, and it's done wonders for us, and it's saved a lot on our bottom line. So once again, this is just some of those tools that we see out there. Like I said, Kansas State one has one that is really, they put it out quite a few years ago. It is really, it's almost over the top. Like I said earlier, it's really hard to try and follow through, but go ahead and take a look at it if you want. But anyway, this concludes this lecture series for this unit. Go out to Blackboard where I have some assignments and a few other things for you to do to finish up this unit. And with that, I'll bid you all a good day. Thank you so much.